This video is now in session, and today, this is the second part of the 2020 presidential election, and we are in 2021. So when you know that we've gone to another year, you know that that this election has taken a very long time to fully rectify. But today is the day where we figure out who will control the U.S. Senate. Will it be Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell? By the end of this video, you will be able to find out based on my prediction, which has a chance of being either 50% correct, 0% correct, or 100% correct. It's almost all or nothing. So to make this judgment, let's first look at the tools that we have available, including early voting in Georgia and the polls of Georgia, and we can also use the 2020 election in Georgia. Before we start with this prediction, partisan irony must say that we now have a YouTube channel. The link is in the Instagram bio, but before today, we have always been posting Instagram videos, but starting from today, we will post both Instagram videos and YouTube videos, as we now have our own dedicated YouTube channel. The next thing for partisan irony is to have a website, which we are in the middle of development on, and that should be available in a couple of months or so. So now let's get started. Let's talk about early voting in Georgia. These are the early voting statistics for the 2021 Senate runoff election, and as you can see here, 40% of registered voters have voted already, and that is historically high for a runoff election, with a runoff election usually having way less in terms of the percent that turned out for a runoff election. We can see here that counties like Greene County, Oceanside County, Fulton County, DeKalb County, Fayette County, and many other counties have voted in historic numbers already for early voting. 3,093,375 people have already voted, and this is in comparison to the election day voting, where 4,013,155 voters voted. And based on the statistics, we have 123,297 people who have voted in this election who did not vote in the 2020 general election. Now, this group is mainly people who turned 18 after November 3rd and before January 5th, which means that this group of voters votes heavily Democratic because of the young population overwhelmingly voting Democratic based on past precedent. If we can, you can see here with the age demographics from the 2020 election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, 58% of people aged 18 to 29 voted for Joe Biden, while 39% of them voted for Donald Trump, which means that this group votes heavily Democratic. And if we can see through the race and ethnicity, currently 30.9% of the voters that have already voted are non-Hispanic black voters, which is an increase in percentage compared to the 2020 general election. In the 2020 general election, we saw 27.7% of the voters being black Americans, 1.1 million to be exact. And we can see here that the Asian American population that voted, 102,000. So 102,000 Asian Americans have voted. Now, if we look at the 2021 runoff races, we can see that 77,000 Asian Americans have voted, accounting for the election day turnout. This demographic is expected to match the 2020 election. And Asian Americans are having a profound impact on this election, on the 2020 election in Georgia, and will have a profound impact in future elections to come. And I'll say why in a future video after the runoff races. In terms of Native American voting, 5,592 in the 2020 general election and 4,134 here. And the reason why I talk a lot about these voters is because it literally comes down to pretty much hundreds of voters to dozens of voters at this point, because this is mainly an election about turnout. Which party is better at turning out their base? We saw yesterday where Donald Trump held a rally there, and he did talk a lot about how the election was fraudulent in Georgia, but at the same time, he really stressed for the Republican population in Georgia, especially in the northwest region of Georgia, to go out and vote for Kelly Loeffler and Senator David Perdue. Meanwhile, Joe Biden went yesterday also to campaign for Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff, and as a result, we see this all culminated in election day turnout, where turnout is high in both Fulton County and in Walker County and all of the northwest regions of Georgia. As a result, this will be an election about turnout, and it's really going to be tight, which is why you should not really be thinking, or you should not expect results from both Senate races until at least tomorrow, because many of these voters, especially Democratic voters, have voted by mail or voted in person early voting. 3 million, as we saw earlier, and that's close to 75% of the voters who voted in total in the 2020 general election. As a result, these votes will take some time to count, because Georgia legally is not allowed to open the ballots and count the votes until election day, which is today. But Georgia will definitely be a lot quicker than before, at least compared to the 2020 election, now that it has more expertise and knowledge on how to count the votes properly. So that's all the early voting statistics. This really heavily favors Democrats, and Democrats did pretty well in in-person early voting and in absentee voting. Now let's talk about the polls. We can see the polls here that Ossoff is currently having a lead of 1.8 percentage points, while Warnock has a 2.1% lead. Now, the reason why I did not talk about polls first in comparison, I talked about early voting first, is because partisan irony is not relying as much on polls in this prediction, not because the polls were wrong in Georgia. In fact, the polls were pretty accurate in Georgia in the 2020 election, but a lot of these polls are C-rated pollsters. Some are even D-rated pollsters. There are only a total of 4 polls that are conducted by A-rated pollsters, and only 3 organizations have actually conducted polls that are A-rated pollsters. So if we look at those, Survey USA started off with Ossoff with a 1% lead and Warnock with a 5% lead. If we look continuing here, Emerson College, Perdue, and Loeffler were leading, and then Survey USA contradicts that. Then we have the most recent poll from an A-rated pollster from the National Research Incorporated, where we have Ossoff at a +4 and Warnock at a +4. Now, these can definitely be wrong. If we talk about statewide polling errors, the polling error is still big enough where Ossoff and Warnock, who are leading in the polls right now, may actually lose in actuality, with Perdue and Loeffler winning because of that polling error that could occur. So as a result, we're relying less on polls, but this is what the polls look like. If we look at the voter surveys from the 2020 election, as we looked at a little bit before, we can see how Biden was able to capture all voting groups in terms of age besides those above 65. So if we look at the early voting statistics in the 2021 election by age, we can see that 7.3% are from age 18 to 24, and if we add them all up, it surpasses 66 and up. Now, out of these voters, 56 to 65 are expected to go more for David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. But in totality, this is again more about turnout. Who can turn out their base? Is Democrats going to be able to turn out more younger voters in comparison to Republicans turning out less older voters, or will it be vice versa? And that will ultimately culminate in this prediction. This is the 2020 Senate map. Every seat is filled in besides the 2 Georgia seats. Currently, Kelly Loeffler is the incumbent for this seat, while the regular election seat is currently vacant due to Senate quorum rules. But anyway, let's do this prediction. So, this is the prediction that I have, where David Perdue will win his her re-election, while Kelly Loeffler loses her re-election to Raphael Warnock. This is a hybrid of the three scenarios that I outlined in the previous video, and I believe this is the most likely outcome because of how Kelly Loeffler portrayed herself in the 2020 primaries. In the 2020 primaries, she was going against Doug Collins, who was more of a moderate Republican. As a result, she positioned herself as a 100% Trump candidate, where she voted for Trump's policies 100% of the time, which is effectively true. So that might have helped her win the first round of the Senate election against Doug Collins, but that really hurted her in the 2020 runoff election, where she also has to get moderate voters. I said that it was a game of turnout, which party could turn out their voters, but it's obviously also some amount of trying to appease the moderates, trying to appease to the suburbanites of Georgia around the Atlanta metro area, which is why that Kelly Loeffler, I don't think she will be able to win her re-election chances. Now, for the David Perdue seat, I'm a little more iffy about. And David Perdue is more of a moderate. He positioned himself as a moderate in the 2020 general election, but since then he has positioned himself more as a Trump kind of candidate. Now, how this will play out in the actual election, I'm not sure, but based on the information that I have, especially with the polls where Ossoff is not matching Warnock is 0.3 percentage points ahead of Ossoff. If taking that information, partisan irony believes that David Perdue will be able to win his re-election. As a result, Mitch McConnell will be elected for another 2 years as the majority leader of the Senate, with Republicans having 51 of the seats and Democrats having 49 of the seats. But I must bring up a caveat to this, which is that even though Republicans have the majority, Republicans are they're not in a good position, especially with the whole election stealing thing brought up by Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, because a lot of moderate senators like Pat Toomey, Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, all of these senators are pretty pissed at this moment that the more right-wing, the more conservative senators like Ted Cruz are trying to bring up something that they really did not ask for and something that they know will not work. So as a result, these 4 senators have the ability to defect, and it just takes one. If this is the scenario that happens tonight or tomorrow, then it just takes one Republican senator to defect and no Democratic senators to defect for Democrats to have their legislations passed, which means it's not as hard as Republicans having 52 seats in order to get some kind of stimulus package passed or some kind of COVID bill passed, which is important because we are in the midst of a pandemic, and obviously there needs to be action done. So as a result, this is a good way for action to be done while ensuing compromise. So this is the end of this prediction video. This is 2020, man. It has been a heck of a year, but this is my prediction. I hope I'm right. I'm either 100% right or 50% right. So those are not really good chances, but nonetheless, this is my prediction, and I'll see you in the next one.